Behind the dazzling smiles and celluloid perfection of Hollywood's golden age lies a story of profound darkness, one the studios fought to keep buried for decades. In this video, we'll reveal the shocking truths of how the beloved Judy Garland was systematically driven to addiction by her own studio, how the legendary John Barrymore became so desperate he tried to drink perfume, and how the promising starlet Barbara Payton ended her days on a bus stop bench. These are the true, tragic stories of 15 Hollywood icons who were ruled by the bottle, and the secrets they took to the grave. Number 1. Richard Burton. First on our list is the titan himself, Richard Burton, an actor whose booming voice and immense talent were matched only by his legendary appetites. As one of the highest-paid actors of his time, he lived a life of epic proportions, defined by his fiery, jet-setting romance with the equally famous Elizabeth Taylor. Theirs was a love story for the ages, but it was often fueled by staggering amounts of alcohol. Burton wasn't just a social drinker. He was a man engaged in a lifelong, public affair with the bottle. To understand Burton, you have to understand that for him, drinking was as natural as breathing. The sheer scale of Burton's drinking is almost impossible to comprehend, with close sources confirming he often consumed up to 3 bottles of vodka every single day. His addiction was so profound that his perception of sobriety became dangerously warped. In a now infamous story, he assured a worried director he would quit drinking for the duration of the project. He then clarified his version of quitting meant restricting himself to just 1 bottle of vodka per day, a horrifying testament to the depths of his dependency. Ultimately, Burton's talent could no longer hide the physical toll of his addiction, making him a major liability on film sets. During the filming of 1974's The Klansman, he was often so intoxicated and unsteady that he had to be filmed either sitting down or lying on the floor. This tragic spectacle was a far cry from the powerful actor who had once commanded the stage and screen. In 1984, Richard Burton died at the young age of 58 from a brain hemorrhage, a direct and brutal consequence of a life spent at the bottom of a glass. Number 2. Judy Garland, the sweetheart. Judy Garland was, and remains, America's quintessential sweetheart, the cherubic girl from Minnesota with a once-in-a-generation voice. Her role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz made her an international icon, a symbol of youthful innocence and hope for millions. She possessed a raw, heartbreaking talent that could captivate any audience, making her one of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's most valuable assets. But the studio that made her a star was also the source of her lifelong torment, engineering a tragedy that began when she was just a teenager. Here is one of Hollywood's most shameful and shocking secrets. Judy Garland's addiction was not a choice, but a condition forced upon her. To keep her thin and able to work grueling 18-hour days, MGM executives put the teenage star on a strict diet of amphetamines, or pep pills. Then, to ensure she could sleep at night, they would give her barbiturates and sleeping pills. This horrifying, studio-mandated cycle started her on a path of chemical dependency from which she would never truly escape. This early, forced addiction was the poison that fueled her later struggles, leading to her reputation for being unreliable and difficult. Her struggles manifested as erratic behavior on set, getting fired from major productions like Annie Get Your Gun, and several highly publicized suicide attempts. Judy Garland's life became a revolving door of comeback tours and devastating relapses. She died at just 47 from an accidental overdose, the ultimate victim of a studio system that built her up only to completely break her down. Number 3. William Holden, the Golden Boy. William Holden was the definition of Hollywood's golden boy, an impossibly handsome and charismatic star who radiated an easygoing confidence. He was an Oscar-winning actor who anchored timeless classics like Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, and The Bridge on the River Kwai. For decades, he was one of the industry's most reliable and bankable leading men, the picture of success and masculine charm. His life seemed perfect from the outside, but his private life battle with alcoholism would lead to one of the most shocking and grim deaths in Hollywood history. Unlike many of his peers, William Holden's end didn't come in a hospital bed surrounded by loved ones. It came violently and utterly alone. In November 1981, while heavily intoxicated in his Santa Monica apartment, he slipped on a throw rug and gashed his forehead deeply on a bedside table. Tragically, he was too drunk to realize the severity of the wound or to simply pick up the phone and call for help. He reportedly remained conscious for nearly half an hour, slowly bleeding to death before passing out. The tragic scene was not discovered for 4 long days, a deeply unsettling end for a man who had been so beloved by the public. His lonely, preventable death serves as one of the most brutal and cautionary tales of the era. It proves that addiction is an isolating disease that doesn't care about fame, wealth, or past glories. In the end, the golden boy's polished image was shattered by a grim and solitary demise brought on by his lifelong struggle with alcohol. Number 4. W.C. Fields, the comedian. W.C. Fields was a true original, a vaudeville juggler who became one of cinema's most iconic comedians. His famous on-screen persona was that of a grumpy, child-hating, and pompous man who always had a drink in his hand and a cynical quip on his lips. He was beloved for his masterful comic timing and his distinctive, nasally drawl. However, his character's famous love for alcohol was no act. It was a defining, and ultimately fatal, feature of his real life. Fields' drinking habits are the stuff of Hollywood legend, and his stories are all shockingly true. He famously started his day with 2 martinis before breakfast and was never far from his emergency flask, a large cocktail shaker he kept filled with his favorite spirit. He would often bring a thermos to the studio, telling everyone it was filled with grapefruit juice, when it was, in fact, almost entirely gin. By his own proud admission, he consumed roughly 2 quarts of gin every single day. His extreme alcoholism led to a severe health crisis in the mid-1930s that nearly ended his career. But he managed to bounce back for a few more classic films. His body, however, could only take so much punishment from the decades of abuse. In a final, dark piece of irony, W.C. Fields died on Christmas Day, 1946, a holiday he famously and loudly professed to despise. The official cause was a stomach hemorrhage directly related to his chronic alcoholism, a tragic final punchline for a comedic genius. Number 5. Veronica Lake, the fallen star. In the early 1940s, there was no star hotter than Veronica Lake. Standing at just 4'11", she was a sultry and magnetic presence, known for her film noir roles and her iconic peekaboo hairstyle that swept over one eye. Her look was so popular and widely imitated that the US government asked her to change it during World War II, fearing female factory workers would get their hair caught in machinery. For a time, she was the absolute pinnacle of Hollywood glamour and style. However, Lake's time at the top was shockingly brief, as her career went into a nosedive from which it would never recover. She developed a reputation for being incredibly difficult to work with, a problem that was massively exacerbated by her escalating alcoholism. After a series of flops and personal setbacks, including a nasty divorce, Hollywood simply turned its back on her. The studios blacklisted her, and by the early 1950s, the once great star had vanished from the public eye completely. For years, no one knew what had come of her until a reporter from the New York Post made a stunning discovery in 1962. He found the former superstar, the iconic Veronica Lake, working as a cocktail waitress and bartender at the all-women's Martha Washington Hotel in Manhattan. She was living in a run-down room, broke and suffering from paranoia. It was a shocking and deeply tragic final act for a woman who had once had the entire world at her feet. Number 6. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckler. Errol Flynn was the original Hollywood adventurer, the handsome, athletic star who defined the swashbuckler genre with his iconic performances in The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood. His personal life was even more outrageous than his on-screen exploits, filled with wild parties, infamous womanizing, and a reckless disregard for any and all rules. He lived his life at a breakneck pace, embracing an image of decadent, charming roguishness. And at the center of that image was a sea of alcohol. Flynn's yacht, the Sirocco, became a floating symbol of his debauchery, notorious for its non-stop, alcohol-fueled parties. His friends and fellow partiers darkly joked about the vessel, giving it the grim nickname Cirrhosis by the Sea, a morbid pun on the liver disease his lifestyle was surely causing. Flynn's consumption was so legendary that it became part of his identity. He wasn't just a man who drank. He was Errol Flynn, a professional hedonist for whom excess was a full-time job. The non-stop party, however, came with a heavy price that Flynn's body began to pay early. After a collapse in his early 30s, a doctor informed the star that his years of hard drinking and drug use had given him the internal organs and heart of a man twice his age. He ignored the warnings and continued his destructive lifestyle for 2 more decades. In 1959, at the age of just 50, Errol Flynn's abused body finally gave out, and he died of a massive heart attack. Number 7. John Barrymore, the Great Profile. John Barrymore was true acting royalty, a member of the legendary Barrymore family and hailed by many as the greatest American actor of his generation. Known as the Great Profile for his impossibly handsome features, He was a master of both Shakespearean tragedy on stage and charismatic roles on screen. He possessed a level of talent and prestige that few could ever hope to match. But behind the genius was a devastating, all-consuming addiction that would lead to one of the most pathetic stories in Hollywood history. Barrymore's alcoholism was not just a habit. It was a ravenous demon that drove him to shocking and desperate acts. As his life spiraled out of control, his search for alcohol became relentless and pitiful. In a horrifying moment of clarity for his family, his second wife, the writer Blanche Ulrich, once found him in his room frantically trying to drink the contents of her perfume bottle. This single, grim anecdote reveals the appalling depth of his addiction, a man so lost he would consume poison for a fix. For an actor, a sharp mind is the most essential tool, and it was the first thing alcohol stole from John Barrymore. In his later years, his memory was so ravaged by drinking that he was completely unable to remember his lines. To get through a scene, he had to rely on giant cue cards placed just off camera, a humiliating fate for the man who once considered himself the master of his craft. His addiction didn't just kill him, it slowly and publicly erased the very genius that had made him a legend. Number 8. Barbara Payton, The Cautionary Tale. In the late 1940s and early 50s, Barbara Payton was a promising starlet with stunning looks and a fiery personality. The blonde bombshell was turning heads and landing roles alongside major stars like James Cagney and Gregory Peck. She seemed to be on the fast track of A-list stardom, catching the eye of powerful men and Hollywood producers alike. But her journey is perhaps Hollywood's most terrifying and rapid cautionary tale about how quickly a promising career can be annihilated by personal demons. Payton's life quickly devolved into a horrifying public spectacle, fueled by unchecked alcoholism and a penchant for scandal. Her career was destroyed by lurid headlines detailing her messy love affairs, public brawls, and arrests for passing bad checks. Her life became a series of increasingly desperate acts, and she soon lost custody of her young son due to her chaotic lifestyle. The once promising actress was now a notorious Hollywood outcast, spiraling downward with no safety net. The final, devastating chapter of her life came in 1963, providing one of the most haunting images of a falling star. Barbara Payton was arrested for public intoxication after police found her sleeping on a bus stop bench on Sunset Boulevard. She was wearing nothing but a bathing suit and a thin coat, a destitute and broken woman. Just 5 years later, at the age of 39, she was found dead on the floor of her parents' bathroom, her body ravaged by heart and liver failure. Before we reveal our final 7 stars and their shocking stories, we want to hear from you. If you're finding these hidden stories of Hollywood fascinating, take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. You won't believe the secrets we have coming up next, including the on-set conflict that nearly derailed one of the biggest blockbusters of all time. Number 9. Robert Shaw, The Shark Hunter. Robert Shaw was a formidable and intense English actor, respected for his powerful performances on both stage and on screen. However, he is forever immortalized in cinematic history for one role: Quint, the grizzled, obsessive shark hunter in the 1975 blockbuster Jaws. Shaw's portrayal was so convincing and terrifying that he became inseparable from the character. But the tension on screen was mirrored by very real, alcohol-fueled chaos behind the scenes that nearly sank the entire production. Filming Jaws was already a nightmare due to malfunctioning mechanical sharks in rough seas, and Shaw's heavy drinking only made things worse. He constantly antagonized his co-star, Richard Dreyfuss, goading him relentlessly between takes. The two were often at each other's throats, and their genuine off-screen animosity created a palpable tension that director Steven Spielberg later admitted was perfect for their characters' on-screen dynamic. The truth behind Shaw's most famous scene, Quint's haunting monologue about the USS Indianapolis, is even more compelling than the myths. Shaw attempted to film the speech for the first time while genuinely drunk, believing it would help his performance. The take was a complete disaster, unfocused and unusable. Mortified by his unprofessionalism, Shaw called director Steven Spielberg late that night and begged for another chance. He returned to set the next day, sober and determined, and delivering the chilling, unforgettable, and flawless take in one go. The legendary performance was not the product of alcohol, but of a brilliant actor's pride in overcoming it. Number 10. Humphrey Bogart, The Icon. Humphrey Bogart remains the undisputed king of Hollywood cool, a cultural icon whose tough guy persona in classics like Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon defined an era. The American Film Institute named him the greatest male star in the history of American cinema, and his legacy is one of gruff integrity and effortless charisma. In his personal life, however, heavy drinking often brought out a much uglier side, a Jekyll and Hyde transformation that was infamous among his friends and colleagues. Friends often said that Humphrey Bogart was a perfect gentleman and a charming host, until about 11:30 at night. It was then that his drunken alter ego, known simply as Bogey, would emerge. This version of Bogart was mean, aggressive, and prone to starting fights over the smallest things. In one bizarre incident, he was arrested for assault after punching two women in a club who had tried to play with a giant stuffed panda he had brought with him as a drinking buddy. Bogart's belligerent behavior got him kicked out and permanently banned from countless hotels, clubs, and restaurants in both New York and Hollywood. His troublemaking was so consistent that his fourth wife, Lauren Bacall, often had to manage his outbursts. He was a functioning alcoholic for most of his career, but the lifetime of heavy drinking and smoking eventually caught up to him. He died of esophageal cancer in 1957, a tough guy defeated by his own vices. Number 11. Ava Gardner, the Barefoot Contessa. Often called the world's most beautiful animal, Ava Gardner was a true force of nature, a sultry and fiery actress who radiated a raw, untamed sensuality. The sharecropper's daughter from North Carolina became one of Hollywood's biggest stars, famous for her tumultuous marriage to Frank Sinatra and her fiercely independent spirit. She lived life entirely on her own terms, and those terms usually included a stiff drink in her hand and a disregard for polite society's rules. Gardner was famously a man's woman, who could hold her liquor and trade stories with the toughest men in the room, including her hard-drinking husband Sinatra and her friend, the writer Ernest Hemingway. She was a world-class partier, known for dancing on tables and staying out until dawn. When she moved abroad to escape the confines of Hollywood, her life became a whirlwind of bullfighters, flamencos, and endless nights fueled by Spanish wine and hard liquor. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Gardner's career wasn't immediately derailed by her drinking, but the years of indulgence eventually took their toll. The hard living slowly eroded her legendary beauty and contributed to declining health in her later years. A series of strokes eventually left her partially paralyzed and bedridden. The once vibrant and fiery spirit who had taken on the world was finally quieted, a living testament to a life lived hard and fast. Number 12. Spencer Tracy, the respected actor. On screen, Spencer Tracy was the picture of integrity and quiet strength. He was one of the most respected and naturalistic actors of his generation, winning 2 back-to-back Academy Awards and starring in numerous classics. He was deeply admired by his peers for his professionalism and his seemingly effortless talent. But behind his facade of quiet dignity, Tracy was hiding a shameful and destructive secret. He was a severe binge-drinking alcoholic who lived in constant fear of his own demons. Tracy's pattern was terrifyingly consistent. After wrapping a film, he would go on what he called a disappearing act. He would check himself into a luxury hotel, locking the door, and drink himself into complete stupor for days or even weeks at a time. During these binges, he would become violent and destructive, often smashing furniture and injuring himself. His friends and his longtime partner, Katharine Hepburn, lived in terror of these episodes, which he would emerge from filled with shame and with no memory of what he'd done. What made Tracy's alcoholism so tragic was the vicious cycle of guilt that perpetuated it. As a devout Catholic who was separated but never divorced from his wife, he was consumed by shame over his drinking and his relationship with Hepburn. The intense remorse would drive him back to the bottle to numb the pain, creating a self-destructive loop he could never escape. His struggle was a quiet, private hell that stood in stark contrast to the dignified man the world thought they knew. Number 13. Lee Marvin, the tough guy. Lee Marvin carved out a legendary career playing Hollywood's ultimate tough guys. With his prematurely white hair, intimidating stature, and gravelly voice, he was utterly convincing as a hard-nosed army sergeant, a ruthless outlaw, or a violent criminal. A decorated World War II Marine who was wounded in combat, he brought a genuine sense of danger and authenticity to his roles. For Lee Marvin, however, the tough guy persona didn't always end where the camera stopped rolling. Marvin was a notoriously heavy drinker and an infamous brawler, and the line between his life and his art was often completely blurred. His off-screen exploits were the stuff of legend, filled with stories of epic drinking sessions and wild bar fights across the globe. He fully inhabited the persona of a man who lived hard, played hard, and answered to no one. For him, drinking wasn't a shameful secret to be hidden, it was an integral part of his public identity, unlike many of his peers who were tormented by their addictions. Lee Marvin seemed to have few regrets about his hard-living lifestyle. He embraced his reputation as a hellraiser, and it only seemed to enhance his on-screen authenticity. His drinking was part of the package, inseparable from the intimidating but respected actor he was. He managed to maintain a successful career despite his habits, a rare case of a star whose public persona was strong enough to contain his demons. Number 14. Joan Crawford, the diva. Joan Crawford was the ultimate Hollywood survivor, a true force of will who clawed her way up from poverty to become one of the most enduring stars in history. Her career spanned over 4 decades, from silent films to modern horror, all thanks to her meticulous preparation, iron discipline, and relentless ambition. She crafted an image of perfect, untouchable glamour and control, but behind the pristine facade was the private life awash in alcohol and rage. After marrying the chairman of Pepsi-Cola, Crawford became the company's most famous ambassador, and her public image became inextricably linked to the soda. However, her travel writer revealed her true beverage of choice. Alongside cases of Pepsi, she demanded every hotel room be stocked with a staggering amount of hard liquor, most notably multiple fifths of 100 proof Smirnoff vodka. It was widely known that the oversized Pepsi cup she carried everywhere was often generously spiked with her favorite clear spirit. The true horror of Crawford's alcoholism was kept hidden from the public until after her death, with the publication of her adopted daughter Christina's explosive memoir, Mommy Dearest. The book detailed terrifying, violent rages, and bizarre episodes of cruelty, all allegedly fueled by Crawford's heavy drinking. While the specifics are still debated, the book painted a chilling and unforgettable portrait of a public saint who was a private monster, her perfect image shattered forever by allegations of alcohol-fueled abuse. Number 15. Peter O'Toole, the Charmer. With his piercing blue eyes and roguish Irish charm, Peter O'Toole was one of the most charismatic and talented actors of his generation. He shot to international stardom with his mesmerizing performance in the 1962 epic, Lawrence of Arabia, for which he earned the first of his 8 Oscar nominations. O'Toole was also a legendary caresser and drinking partner of Richard Burton, but one of his most famous alcohol-related stories is more bizarrely comical than tragic. During the grueling production of Lawrence of Arabia, both O'Toole and his co-star Omar Sharif were absolutely terrified of riding their camels, especially at a full gallop. To overcome their fear before filming the pivotal scene of the attack on Aqaba, the 2 actors decided to get completely and utterly drunk. O'Toole later recalled being strapped to his camel by the crew and having almost no memory of filming one of the most iconic and celebrated sequences in all of cinema's history, a testament to the power of liquid courage. The glittering legacy of Hollywood's golden age is undeniable, but it was built on a foundation that wasn't often soaked in booze and tears. These weren't just simple stories of overindulgence. They were epic tragedies of immense talent wrestling with the crushing pressure of fame, the deep-seated personal demons, and a studio system that often looked the other way. The stories of these fallen angels serve as a somber and powerful reminder of the profound human cost of manufacturing the Hollywood dream. The ghosts of classic Hollywood have so many more secrets to tell, and we're here to uncover all of them. If you want to dive deeper into these forgotten histories, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and have hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Let us know in the comments which Hollywood legend story fascinates or shocks you the most. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.